savings accounts and 401k accounts of so many Americans and so many retirees. They're up as the stock market is. Now, that's not going to go on forever, but it's certainly something positive that most Americans can be pleased about. There are more Americans now employed than ever before in our nation's history. Manufacturing jobs, which we really used to be hurting in this country and have been in decline for a long time, are now coming back. Manufacturing jobs are including by hundreds of thousands. Unemployment, as I mentioned, 50-year low. 4 million Americans no longer need to rely upon food stamps. That's a positive thing. Retail sales are up. We're finally becoming energy independent. In fact, the U.S. is now a net natural gas exporter for the first time in 60 years. 60 years, we're now an exporter of natural gas.
These are the things that the Republicans care about instead of protecting democracy.
Law, which allows people who oftentimes they don't have a lot of chance.
These are the bullshit.
It's been considered fatal, and they'd like to try some drug that maybe comes out some years down the road, but they're willing to try it now because of this. It's giving some people a hope, and hopefully will save some lives. That was the president's idea. Our military is stronger than it's been in a long, long time, and thank God we're actually increasing the pay for our men and women in uniform, and they deserve even more. There are two great judges, I would argue. Some of my Democratic colleagues would probably disagree with me here, but two great judges on the Supreme Court now. Elections have consequences. They'd have been very, very different had Hillary Clinton been elected last time. Elections have consequences, and there are many circuit court judges that they're filling in the Senate, and thank God for that. The president withdrew us from that awful Iran deal, which essentially allowed money, billions of dollars, to go to terrorists. It's now being used against us by Iran. We've seen the embassy, our U.S. embassy, move to Jerusalem. Thank God for that. We've seen, finally, we're starting to strengthen our southern borders, although we've got a long way to go there. Despite all these things, when the Democrats took over the House earlier this year in January, one of the first things they did, articles of impeachment were introduced earlier this January in the House. And that very same day, one of their members, in a profanity-filled speech, famously said, we're going to impeach the bleep. She didn't bleep it, obviously. And another said, if we don't impeach the president, he might well get reelected. I mean, is that a reason to impeach a president because he might get reelected? Well, it was to them. It really goes back 2 years inauguration, the hatred for this president
This
when he got elected.
is
We saw it in the streets
what
here in
the
Washington.
Republicans
Now, a
care
lot of
about.
people came up here to protest, and that's fine.
And
We
this
also
is
saw
how
windows broken. We
America's
saw,
going to fall.
one
When they
person,
take away
saying that she was
democracy,
dreaming about
what the
blowing up
crime of
White House
democracy
and that
was
sort of
built
thing. So
on
it really did get
because of their love for Donald
the
Trump,
bottom line
or
is
their
we
love for
are
their
looking
racial
for an
agenda.
excuse for years
You
now
feel
to
me?
impeach this president. They are wafer thin. We should not be moving forward on something like this. The country deserves a lot better than they're getting in this impeachment process.
Do you understand?
I'll be glad when we get beyond this because it's bad for the country, very divisive. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Does anyone else seek recognition on this amendment? For what purpose does Mr. Buck seek recognition?
Move to strike last word.
And is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I hear my colleague from Rhode Island say that this isn't about policy differences. This is about our obligation to protect and defend our Constitution. It's about courage. Well, of course it's about policy differences because you said nothing on your side when President Obama sent his surrogates out to lie about Benghazi. You said nothing when President Obama's administration entered into a gun running deal with Mexican cartels and the Fast and Furious program was developed. You said nothing about Democrat leaders. This is about a policy difference. It's not about courage. I don't question anyone's courage on the other side of the aisle. I question your judgment. I don't question your courage. And I think that the American people are getting tired. And I say that
history
because
is
I have
gonna
a
go
friend
down.
in
It's gonna go down in
college,
history that the
and Jim
Democrats
sent
trying
me
to
a
do the
text.
right
And
thing,
just so you know a little bit about
but the
Jim, his
Republicans
dad was a pastor south of the
overlook
Mason
doing
line
the
in the
right
60s
thing
and 70s, who was a leader in
for
the
the
civil rights movement.
bullshit. Do
Jim
you
didn't vote
understand?
for Donald Trump. He didn't vote for Mitt Romney. He didn't vote for John McCain. But Jim sent me a text, and he said, "Would you tell your Democrat colleagues that I'm voting for Donald Trump this next time around?" And by the way, he tells me that he believes that your party is overreaching at this point. Overreaching. The last text he sent me was kind of interesting. He said the stock market closed at a record high. They're losing. But I thought about that overreach comment. And I thought about what was the most ludicrous of the ways that this group of Democrats in the House have tried to take out this president. And there are a lot to choose from. My favorite happens to be the 25th Amendment. I thought when y'all came up with the 25th Amendment, it was right at the top. You call in a professor from Yale, and that professor from Yale could have been right out of a movie about the old Soviet Union, testifying in Congress. Well, it takes a majority of the cabinet to invoke the 25th Amendment, but this president might be, he would need an examination. And when asked by a member, could he be detained? Could the president of the United States be detained for purposes of a examination? She said yes. Right out of the old Soviet Union. That was my favorite. My second favorite was the Emoluments Clause, because I had to run to the Constitution to figure out what the heck you guys were talking about with the Emoluments Clause. But I guess anybody that is successful and that has worldwide businesses is going to be subject to an Emoluments Clause argument. Thankfully, you didn't include that in this set of articles. You've had 4 now on the floor of the House, and you think that somehow we're not showing courage when we stand here and tell you you don't have the facts to convict this president on these charges. And you don't. The thing that's going to change is when this moves over to the Senate, you lose the narrative. Because the Republicans in the Senate will call Hunter Biden. They will call the whistleblower. And you better wait and see what the American public does when all of the facts are out. You don't get to hide the facts in the basement anymore. All the facts are going to be coming out. So I asked a few of my friends whether they had any favorites, and I will yield to my friend from Arizona if he'd like to talk about some of his more outrageous scenarios that our friends, the Democrats, have proposed on this president.
I thank my friend for yielding, and you really took the 25th Amendment. Really was really right at the top of the heap there. But I mean, virtually every time the president tweets something, I've heard criticism that he should be impeached for tweeting. In fact, the Harvard law professor who was in here last week wrote a piece that he should be impeached for tweeting in 2017. That was fun. The other one is the bribery. The bribery issue. That was fun too, because when you had this, when Professor Carlin tried to explain it, it took her 5 minutes to try to explain what the bribery was, and then we didn't hear any more from our colleagues about what bribery.
Bruh,
Yield back.
bruh,
Gentlemen, yield
I'm
back.
telling you, bro.
Chairman.
These
Chairman,
people,
recognition.
the Republicans, do all this
Chairman.
thing just playing, bro, to fulfill God's
Jeffrey's
word, bro.
recognition.
That
What
Donald
purpose
Trump
is the
would die, bro.
Move to strike the last
But
word.
I'm trying to tell you, when he goes to the
My
Senate,
colleague
the
suggested that
Republicans
we're
are
here
going
because
to
we have
vote
policy
against it.
disagreements with this
You
president.
feel me? They're
We do
going to
have
vote
some policy
against it.
disagreements with this
And
president.
that's what I'm trying
We
to tell
disagree
these
with the
people.
fact that you passed as your signature legislative
You hear what the
accomplishment in
Republicans
the
are
last
saying.
Congress, a
So when my
GOP
words
tax
come to
scam
pass,
where
they don't have
83%
to
of the
lie.
benefits went to the wealthiest 1%. You exploded the deficit and the debt. We disagree with that. We disagree with your policy of separating God's children from their parents and
But I'm
caging
done. I
those
just want to
children.
make a record of this, bro.
That was unacceptable,
So you can hear me.
unconscionable, and un-American. We disagree with that.
This is a Democrat.
We disagree with your effort, which is ongoing, to strip away health care from more than 100 million Americans with pre-existing conditions. We disagree with that as well. But we're not here at this moment undertaking this solemn responsibility because we disagree with his policy positions. We'll deal with that next November. We're here because the president pressured a foreign government to target an American citizen for political gain, thereby soliciting foreign interference in the 2020 election by withholding $391 million in military aid without justification. Now, the president says that was perfect. Here's what others have had to say about that. Ambassador Sondland, who gave the president $1 million for the inauguration, said it was a quid pro quo. Lieutenant Colonel Vindman, Iraq war veteran, said it was improper. Dr. Fiona Hill, the Trump appointee, what did she say? Political errand. Ambassador Taylor, West Point graduate, appointed by Reagan, Bush, and Trump, Vietnam War hero. He said it was crazy. And John Bolton, a super conservative Trump national security advisor, said it was a drug deal. What would the framers of the Constitution have said? Impeachable. I yield to my colleague from California, Eric Swallow.
I thank the gentleman. In my colleague's efforts to defend this president, you want him to be someone he's not. You want him to be someone he is telling you he is not. You're trying to defend the call in so many different ways, and he's saying, guys, it was a perfect call. He's not who you want him to be. And let me tell you how selfish his acts were. And Ranking Member Collins, you can deny this as much as you want. People died in Ukraine at the hands of Russia. And Ukraine, since September 2018, when it was voted on by Congress, was counting on our support. 1 year passed, and people died. And you may not want to think about that. It may be hard for you to think about that. But they died when this selfish president withheld the aid for his own personal gain. And I get it. Oh, Obama, he only gave them X, Y, Z. We've proven the record that President Obama gave them not only military capabilities, military training, and medical equipment. So don't tell yourself Ukrainians didn't die. They died. Ambassador Taylor, he said, these were weapons and assistance that allowed the Ukrainian military to deter further incursions by the Russians against Ukrainian territory. If that further aggression were to take place, more Ukrainians would die. So it is a deterrent effect these weapons provide. But you didn't only hurt Ukraine, Mr. President, by doing this. You helped Russia. And to my colleagues who believe we have such an anti-corruption president in the White House, I ask you this: how many times did this anti-corruption president meet with the most corrupt leader in the world, Vladimir Putin? How many times did he talk to him? 16 times between meetings and phone conversations. And how many conditions did the president put on Vladimir Putin to get such an audience with the most powerful person in the world at the highest office? 0 conditions. That's who you're defending. So keep defending him. We will defend the Constitution, our national security, and our elections. I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. He seeks recognition. Mr. Klein, for what purpose do you seek recognition?
Mr. Chairman, I move to strike the last words.
Gentleman is recognized.
Mr. Chairman, first I want to thank the gentleman, my colleague, Mr. Jeffries, for laying bare what we all have known, is that they have policy differences, and as he said, they'll deal with it next November. they're not really interested in removing this president from office. They don't think that the Senate's going to remove him from office. They get it. This is all a political exercise on their end just to help them in next November's election. That's what it's all about for them. And it's infuriating to me that they put on this show and waive their constitutions, which they must have just found because, you know, I've been at this a long
That's a
time. And I
Republican.
don't see folks on their side of the aisle waiving the Constitution, much less reading from it very often. But it's good to know that they're actually finally talking about what their real motives are, to use this as a political maneuver for advantage in the 2020 election. And with that, I'd yield to the ranking member.
Thank you for yielding. Mr. Swalwell, I'm not sure if the hearing is bad on that end, because undoubtedly it is. I did not say
Hey, man,
no one
I've
died.
gotten the evidence I
Undoubtedly,
need,
you
man.
have a trouble
State my
reading an
case. Like
article
I
that
said,
says
bro,
people died.
when America
No one
falls,
said that.
blame the
And you
Republicans.
can accuse whatever, because you're just sitting there just telling
America's
untruths
gonna
because
fall,
you
bro.
don't
I don't
get it,
care
because
what
you have a personal
anybody says.
agenda, and make your
Like,
own
this is
history
all
roll through
prophecy. That's why I'm
prospect of being
recording it,
impeachment manager.
because
That's
this is a
great.
prophetic event.
But you can't
All
get
this,
into
what
this
they doing, is prophetic
because it's someone
events.
who says
And
they
these are
watch people die on
prophecies
the
that
battlefield.
are
I
coming to
know when
pass.
people die.
Events and
I
prophecies
know when
come
they come into the
together.
hospital,
I
they've
have
been
that
shot
y'all
up, they've
know.
been hit with IED.
Peace, peace.
So to come in here and to take a shot saying, "Oh, Mr. Collins doesn't think people die,"